Are you a multitasker? You're probably not. Research says only about 2.5% of the population can truly multitask on anything more than walking and chewing gum. What you are is a task switcher. So, task switching is when we interrupt one task to attend to another. And that's what we actually are doing when we think we're multitasking. I catch myself doing this all the time because I don't know, I'm addled and distracted as much as anybody. And I notice that I'm listening to a podcast, and if the podcast starts to get, a little bit slow, all of a sudden I realize I'm opening my phone and I'm trying to read an article. And I noticed that, oh, I just missed all of what happened in the podcast because I was toggled to the article, or vice versa. Our brains pretty much can only do one attention based task at a time. And every time that we need to switch from one to another, we pay a price, and we pay in several different currencies. So there's the actual physical cost of switching from one thing to the next. So recent research of people in a bunch of different Fortune 500 companies in a bunch of different roles showed that the average person switches between inputs like different computer screens or software programs 1,200 times a day. 1,200. Some of the roles they looked at were well over 3,000 task switches every single day. So at the 1,200 average, that's costing about 4 hours just in literally the time it takes to go from one to another. So there's a big physical cost. There's a huge cognitive cost, even bigger than the physical cost, because not only does research show that it reduces our efficiency, so we actually go a lot slower at task A and task B when we're trying to do them both, but it also reduces our quality. So you can see that the quality slips in both A and B when you're trying to do both at the same time. But it also has emotional costs. So we can see that people's frustration goes up. There's a lot of emotional tax that we pay when we're trying to attend to a bunch of things. There's just even the frustration of, I feel like I can't get anything done. I'm all over everywhere. It's very anxiety provoking. The research shows that we also get worse at figuring out what's irrelevant. So our filtering skills deteriorate as we try and do a bunch of things at the same time. So all of a sudden, we're just bobbing from one thing to another and not realizing that this thing doesn't actually need my attention, or it certainly doesn't need it right now. But that filter gets a bit, degraded, a bit crappy. The other thing is that your memory really declines. So anything that went in one of these tasks probably didn't stay in. So that's another huge cost. So there is a profound cost to task switching. It's something you want to really minimize. You want to create time blocks and use other time management tools to allow you to get to focus and flow where you can work really effectively. And I get it's hard to get there. The average employee is interrupted every 11 minutes, and they only return to the initial task 25 minutes later, which, if you do the math, means that the person gets interrupted during their interruption. So I know how hard it is, but that's what really makes a difference. For me, turning off all the notifications, using my very analog, old fashioned time timer is a great way of saying, I'm going to stay on task A. It doesn't mean I have to go all the way till it's done, but I do want to get to a certain chunk of time so that I'm working in focus and flow before I switch to something else. But before we just make it sound like this is very black and white, there is one exception in the research to the the horrible impact of task switching, and that is in creativity. So it turns out that if you want to be more creative, you want to interrupt yourself. One really interesting study recently showed that you don't want to interrupt yourself when you feel like interrupting yourself. You want to set a timer and interrupt yourself in the middle of something and switch to something else. When you do that, you become more creative at both tasks. And interestingly, people don't do this naturally. They left people and let them try finding different ways to be more creative. And this is not one they came up with, but the data showed for sure that when you interrupt yourself at a forced moment, so that you're kind of mid thought and switch to something else, you're going to get the benefit of greater creativity. So if you're in a creative job or trying to think outside the box, interruption and task switching might be exactly what you need. But for the vast majority of us and the vast majority of tasks we do, it's slowing you down. I promise you could get home sooner if you just focused on one thing at a time. Here's more strategies for effective time management so you can get out of here and go do something fun.